Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Celine Sauer. I'm from the Graz chapter. And originally, I'm from Germany, but came to Austria for my master program, Global Studies. And I'm a student here, but participating in the Oikos and in the curriculum change initiative from Oikos International. So that's why I'm here today, and I'm happy to introduce Sourav Mukherji today to you. He will tell an interesting story to us. And so, Sourav, can you maybe tell us a bit about yourself first, about your work or your background and your passion you're actively doing right now?
Thank you. Thank you, Celine. Yes, I am, as you said, Sourav Mukherji. I am a professor at one of the management institutes in India called Indian Institute of Management, and this is located in the Indian city of Bangalore. So I have grown up or my basic education is in engineering, but after that, after having worked for a while in the industry, I did my MBA and then did my PhD in management. And when I was doing my PhD in management, I was looking at big Indian companies, how they operate in the global markets. But after a while, having worked in the industry as a consultant, and then when I joined back an institute as a professor, I started gradually reorienting my work towards looking at what we typically called underserved or poverty markets. And I was very inspired by one of my friends, Dr. Harish Hande, who was my senior in the engineering college, who had started an organization called Selco. And Selco provides low-cost solar lights to the very poor in the Indian villages and in urban Indian places. And I got a chance to write a case study on him, on his organization. And that was the time when I got very interested in looking at what we typically called inclusive markets. And I thought that the best way to learn about inclusive markets is to start teaching a course. So it was around 2009, 2010 that I started designing a course called Inclusive Business Models, which I started offering as an elective to the MBA students at the institute. And that's what I have been doing for the past 9 or 10 years. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. Is there anything else, Celine, you would like me to talk to you about?
No, thank you very much. That was a perfect introduction and a perfect way to start the story, I guess. So I know that you have a really interesting, would say, educational story you can share with us. It's about transformation of higher education. And yeah, I'm really interested. Can you share this story with us now?
Sure. Yeah. So when we look at higher education, and I will be talking about management education in India, and when I joined this institute as a faculty member, that was about 17, 18 years ago. This institute caters primarily to students who wants to join the corporate sector. So the institute is known for creating a lot of jobs for people who join the top corporations in India and abroad. And that is how students get attracted to this particular place. And I was also doing very similar work. I was studying the internationalization of Indian firms. I had myself worked in a consulting company called Boston Consulting Group. So I was bringing in my strategy knowledge and analyzing internationalization and so on. But as I told you, when I got this chance to write a case study about my friend's company Selco, I suddenly started thinking that our students do not have exposure to that dimension of India, which is not so advanced, which is not seeing the fruits of globalization. And here I think you must get a little bit of background about India, because while India at one hand is highly developed and it has a lot of rich people, Today, it also has close to about 400 million poor people, and the extent of poverty is quite high. So we have grown up in a country which has this huge inequality. And I thought that while in the MBA curriculum of our institute, students are probably 90% of the courses talk about large corporations and economic growth, there has to be something telling them about the other India that we talk about, where there are people who are poor, there is not great healthcare, there is not great education, there is a lot of informal sector laborers who struggle to make both ends meet. And that is where I started, talking about, studying about various organizations who are actually trying to make a difference. I mean, if you think about it, the story of that India which I am talking about, so many poor people, poor healthcare, poor education, if you look at it, then it will really make you sad. It will not make you proud as a country person saying, oh my God, why do I have so much of problems? But I think a ray of hope comes when you look at social entrepreneurs, when you look at someone like Mr. Dr. Harish Hande or Dr. Devi Sethi, who runs a very large hospital which provides cardiac care to the poor, then you get very inspired. You say that, well, even though there are so many problems and so many challenges, there are these fascinating people who are trying to overcome all these challenges, and they're creating interesting business models. Now, typically when there's a lot of poverty, people would say that it is the government's job to address the needs of the poor. The government collects taxes from people and they should provide them education, they should provide them health. Unfortunately, in India, the government never collects enough tax to do all these activities. And hence there is always this big gap in terms of government's ability to meet the needs of the poor people. Even today, the government is unable to spend more than 1% of its GDP in healthcare, which is very sad for a country like India, but government has all its constraints. So then people think, okay, if the government cannot do all this, then it must be not for profits, the NGOs. But once again, we learn that NGOs have a lot of limitations. That they have limitations in terms of scaling, in terms of raising funds. And that is where I thought that talking about inclusive business models, which means organizations which are structured as a for-profit, and yet they address the needs of the poor, would be something very important. And it is even important for my students, because if you think of it, in the first year of our curriculum, or mostly in the MBA curriculum, we learn about how to make companies profitable, how to make companies win in the marketplace. And we learn operations principles, financial principles, human resource management. So when we talk about these businesses which want to be financially sustainable, and yet their primary purpose is to meet a developmental objective, to actually do good to the poor, then it is almost like putting one more constraint to what the students have learned in the first year. In the first year, you have learned how to make an organization profitable, how to have high performance. But now I am making the scenario a bit more difficult for you. I'm saying it is not only about profitability, not only about performance, but it is also about creating social impact. And I think that that makes a very big difference. Our students sometimes, and all of us, I mean, all of us who are very privileged to receive a lot of good education, etc., we kind of grew up in a bubble, and we start believing that this is the world where, there is resources are available and all the facilities are available. This is it. I mean, this is the world where we need to live in. But the problem is that that is only probably half the reality. There is another reality which exists, especially in countries like ours. And there are very close connections between these two worlds, because if we do not solve the problem of inequality in India, if we do not solve the problem of unemployment in India, then very quickly we will run into big problems. We will not have enough consumers to buy the goods and services which the big companies produce. We will not have enough talent coming into our companies so that we can use them as employees. So inequality is not a problem only of the poor. Inequality is a problem of the entire world, and it is the problem of entire society. If you have too much of inequality, then you can have social unrest. Typically, mischievous people want to capitalize on this inequality, and they confuse people by other issues and say, oh, you are having such a big problem simply because you belong to certain religion or you belong to certain caste. And you are seeing this all over the world. whereas at the root of it is actually the problem of economic inequality. And if you are able to solve that economic inequality problem, then many of the other societal problems will be taken care of. So when I designed this course, I said that when we talk about these various social entrepreneurs who are trying to solve the problems of the poor, in the process, it will be nice to sensitize students to the realities of India with which probably they are not aware of. And as it happens, I mean, the term in which I teach also happens to be our exchange term. So that is a term when we get a lot of students from mostly from Europe and of course some parts of America and Mexico and South America. And we have a very nice mix of students in the class where about 40% of them are coming from outside India, 60% of people are from India. And they collectively look at these problems, they discuss the problems, how these problems manifest in their own countries, and what may be some of the solutions to deal with that. So to talk about this course, I mean, what I have structured it is that for almost every day, we go and study one sector. So one week we study healthcare, another week we study education, in one week we study energy, waste management. All of these are challenges in India, but all these are also challenges in the poverty markets all over the world. And my idea is that once students get familiar with each of these domains and how inclusive business models are being created in each of these sectors, then they will get a sense that how do you solve these problems. At the end of the day, we all need to be problem solvers, right? I mean, that is probably the essence of management. And one of the advantages, if at all, of inequality is that you have some people who are privileged, some people like my students, some people like us who are privileged, who have the resources. So if they can be inspired, then they can actually solve the problems of people who are economically underprivileged. So that's what I kind of try to do through this course. I will stop before I tell you about some interesting exercises that we do as part of the course. And one of the most interesting exercise that we do is, in India, there is a defined poverty level. And today we say that if somebody is spending less than 50 rupees a day, which is not even a dollar, right? 50 Indian rupees a day, then he or she is poor. And anybody who spends more than that is above the poverty line. So I tell my students that, look, there are probably millions of people in India who have to who can't spend more than 50 rupees a day because they just don't have the money. So one day during the course, you people spend under 50 rupees, right? So you just manage your food under 50 rupees and come and tell us the experience. What did you feel about it? And that's a fairly intense exercise for each of the students, because it is not easy unless you are calculating how much what you will buy and in what quantity. It is very difficult to actually do a budget under 50 rupees. And I tell them that, look, it's only your food budget, whereas for a person who is poor, he or she will have to manage a whole bunch of stuff under 50 rupees. And then when the students come back and present in class, they kind of tell us that one of the big realizations that we had was how low in energy we were towards the end of the day, right? You can still manage probably to have a banana and have an egg and eat a little less also on the day. But what happens is that by afternoon and evening, you are very low on energy. So that's a realization that the poor people, when they're eating less, but yet they're expected to work very hard. And hence, how difficult it must have been for them to actually have less food and continue to do working. Right, so this is one exercise which kind of touches the students with the reality. They actually go out and start shopping and try to compare prices between what should I eat, what should I buy, so on and so forth. And finally, they also profile people who are typically poor in India, try to understand their aspirations, try to understand how they spend their money, where they save their money. And towards the end of the course, they come up with an inclusive business model, a business model which addresses some of their needs of the poor people, and yet it is financially viable. So this is how I kind of run the course. It has got a reasonable amount of excitement among the students. I have found many of my students writing back to me after several years saying, that was a course that we still remember, and whenever we get a chance, we would like to start something in terms of entrepreneurship which actually makes a difference to the lives of the poor. So Celine, I think I have probably exceeded my time. And so I will stop here, but happy to answer any question that you have.
Mhm. Now that was actually quite well in time and really interesting. I really liked the aspect of being a bit more practical, like trying to get the students involved and think of it by themselves and sort of get implementations, not just the theory behind it. And I think that's quite a good thing how we can transform education as well to get it more practical. Maybe just one question concerning the competencies when we talk, for example, about the change and innovation competency. I had a feeling that it's quite a change you make here and quite innovative how you do this course. Maybe just can you tell us how you use this competency or how you develop this competency with that course?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is, you also had asked about how do we manage stakeholder relationship, because this is a business school at the end of the day, right? And our key constituencies are corporations. So when I proposed this particular course, people said, well, I mean, it seems to be a nice course, but do you really think our students need to go through this? Because none of them are going to run an NGO, none of them are going to become social entrepreneurs. They will all join corporations. And in some sense, I had to tell them that, look, even if you go and join large corporations, you will have to be socially aware. You will have to be socially conscious. And this is what this course will actually do. Right. And in case if you're joining a large corporation, but corporation wants to spend money on corporate social responsibility, then hopefully this course will give you a framework to understand what to invest, how to measure impact. So one of the lessons that is very important in stakeholder relationship is to really understand what the stakeholder is expecting and to speak their language a little bit, right? So you don't want to compromise what you want to do, but at the same time you need to understand that they are also coming from certain expectations and you have to address their concerns. So I think I was able to do that. And obviously we are we also, our management school has a good department of public policy. So I got a lot of support from my colleagues in the public policy area who said, indeed, this is something, a course that is necessary, even though we are a very much a business school, but to understand how to apply business principles in a constrained environment, this course can be very useful. So that was one. I think about competencies. I think one of the most important thing that had happened is that as I was designing the course, I was actually writing about these organizations. So when I was writing these case studies about these organizations, it really helped me to understand their challenges. I spent time with them, and that made me very familiar with the challenges that they were facing every day. What are the solutions that were coming up? And over a period of time, I have written about 12 or 13 cases about different organizations working in this domain, and many of them have been published. And all of the social entrepreneurs, the founders, we have become good friends. So we exchange thoughts, we kind of discuss. As we grew in our own relationship, some of them have invited me to be a consultant advisor. Today I sit on 3 boards, which are for not-for-profits. So over a period of time, that is how my competency developed. I mean, when I started this course, I would never have thought myself to be any way close to an expert in this domain. I still don't do that. I mean, I tell people that, look, I have never run a social enterprise myself. So in that sense, probably, I'm not an expert, but my benefit is that I have read about them. I have looked at some 15, 20, 30 of the social enterprise and different models. And that's why it's my ability to synthesize. It's my ability to, look across all of these enterprises and give you some lessons out of that. I think that is what my competence is. And that is what typically a teacher or an educationist would do. Right. So that, but I totally agree with you that this is a sector where I have found people to be very action oriented, to be highly problem solver. And I think that's what I want my students also to understand, that, there will always be constraints, always be challenges, but go ahead and create some solution, try out something. And by trying out and failing, you will learn a lot more rather than sitting back and thinking, oh my God, can I really do that? And I think that's a very key lesson which I have myself derived from creating and running this course.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think this is already a good point to close this topic. As you just said, just start something, just try something. Would that maybe be one key message you want to leave to the audience?
Yes, I would do that. And many a time students come up and ask me that I want to be a social entrepreneur. What we heard in this course was very inspiring. What do you want me to do? Where do I start? And these are the two things I tell them. One is that you got to start somewhere. So make a start as soon as possible, because you will fail, and that's okay, because most entrepreneurs fail, but that is how they learn and eventually will succeed. That's one. But the second also is a very important point, is how do you connect to that, right? Don't do it because that is something nice to do, but ask yourself that how am I connected to this space? What is the problem that I feel very deeply passionate about? Right? If it is energy, then go to energy. If it is healthcare, then devote your time to healthcare. If it is infrastructure, if it is housing, then devote your energy to housing. Understand the domain, because it is a very difficult problem. Right? This is not an easy problem to solve, and you will fail and you will struggle. And unless and until you have a very deep conviction that, well, I will teach myself, I will educate myself, and eventually I will succeed, you will actually probably give up, right? Because most of us are pretty privileged. I mean, our options are many in life because we are educated and we have health. So it's very easy to abandon something very difficult and settle for something easy. And I would say that many of my students do that. I mean, a consulting job is an easy job to do compared to being a social entrepreneur. Or if you go in a bank as an investment banker, I think that's a much easier job to do than being a social entrepreneur, right? So you will only stick to this if you are connected deeply to that domain. And my students and the social entrepreneurs whom I have seen successful are people like that, who so feel so strongly about that problem or about the people that nothing can move them away from it. Even if they fail, they will get up and they will do something else. I think that's also very important.
Thank you very much. I think that's a wonderful idea and a wonderful practice everyone can do and can focus on. So yes, I think we're at the end of our time. Thank you so much for your participation. It was really interesting, and yeah, we really appreciate your story. So please feel free to contact us via email if you need something, or if you want to share something else. And if you wish, and if you like, you can, of course, share and promote the idea of the Next Gen Lead.
I will
With
do that. I will do that because I have been an Oikos alumni. I have gone, and several years ago I had gone to Switzerland and talked in Oikos gathering. When I was a doctoral student, I had actually attended an Oikos PhD student seminar in a village in Switzerland. I don't even know how many of you know this village called Kaubad, Kaubad. Some place I had to go and all, but that was such a great experience. So I feel very deeply about Oikos, and I always consider myself to be an ambassador for Oikos. And I'm glad that we kind of connected again, and I had this opportunity to share what I have been doing in a very small way in this corner of the world.
Super, we're very, very glad as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Best of luck.